Hi everyone, it's Emily and we're due for another pickups video. So I'll be sharing all of my October pickups along with some things I got in September, but I haven't shared officially on the channel yet. So there have been a ton of sales lately and I definitely took part, especially last month, and I bought a ton of games. And it kind of made up for me not buying so many games in September. I believe I only picked up one game in September, which I'll share in this video, but everything else is basically from October. Because there's just so many games to go through, as well as a few figure pickups that I got last month, I'm just gonna briefly talk about all the games I got from GameStop. I already made a video on the channel going through 8 of these so-called new games that I ordered online from GameStop during their Pro Week super sale. So a lot of the games were either $10 or between 50 to 75% off. Normally I do try to avoid GameStop because a lot of so-called new games are not brand new sealed if you order online. But because of these deals, I took the chance, and you'll have to see in that video which of these actually came brand new sealed. But I got some Switch games here, as well as quite a number of PS5 games. So when I made that video, I only shared 8 of the 9 that had arrived at the time, but I recently got the 9th one in this lovely bubble mailer. So I'm gonna reveal whether or not this came brand new sealed or complete in box but opened, or if it just came in some random generic case. Like I've been seeing a lot of horror stories lately on Twitter. That happening to a lot of people. So while I did remove my address, I do have the return label here. And so it does say GameStop.com returns, which I feel like is a bad omen if you're hoping for a brand new sealed game. And so I already opened it, but the game that arrived is Grim Grimoire once more for the PS5. And to see here, it has the new sticker here. However, it was opened. Thankfully, it does still come with its little art book, as well as the soundtrack code, which I did check to see whether or not it was used or not, and thankfully it was still valid. But Grim Grimoire once more is a remake of Vanillaware's PS2 game that NAS America published this year. And I've been kind of torn whether or not I wanted to get the Switch version or the PS5 version. But when GameStop had their sale, the PS5 version was on sale for $12.50, whereas the Switch version was $25. And that kind of helped cement me that might as well just pick this up on the PS5. While I really do enjoy strategy games and Vanillaware titles, I'm a little hesitant whether or not I'm going to truly enjoy this game. Mostly because it just looks very chaotic, especially the further you get into the game's mechanics. Most of the strategy games I've played have all been turn-based, and you kind of sit and kind of plan out your moves. While the reviews I've seen for this one seem to get very chaotic very fast. So we'll see whether or not I'll enjoy this. But at $12.50, I figured that was a good price point for me to give it a go. All right, now with all the GameStop stuff out of the way, I'm going to move on to my Nintendo Switch pickups. So starting with the Legend of Nayuta Boundless Trails. I actually featured the collector's edition in my chill room reorganization, or my shelf tour update, where I went a little bit more into detail about what was included in the package. But game-wise, this is one I'm really hoping to get to sometime next month, because it is in the Legend of Heroes Kaseki universe, but it's really not related to the mainline games. Instead, it's its own story, and it plays a little bit more like Ys in that it's an action RPG. Originally, it was a Japanese exclusive PSP game that we now have translated into English on the Switch and PS4. I've heard nothing but good things about this title, and I just love Falcom's PSP entries, in particular Trails in the Sky and the Crossbell duology. So I'm really excited to see what they did with Nayuta here. The next two are 2 games that I also featured on the channel already, and I promise this is the last of the repeats, and that is Coffee Talk and Coffee Talk Episode 2. Serenity Forge, who is the publisher for these physical retail editions, was kind enough to send both these copies my way, along with the collector's edition for the second game, which currently I am hosting a giveaway on the channel, which is open internationally, and it's still going until November 8th. So if you'd like to participate, be sure to watch that unboxing video to learn how to enter. I'm really happy to see that many of you are interested in the game, and I will say that quite a number of you didn't follow the instructions correctly to enter the giveaway, so just be very mindful of maybe rereading your entry to make sure that you followed all 3 criteria, especially that last one where you're supposed to answer why. So I just wanted to do a general reminder because I noticed many people didn't quite follow the steps that I laid out. But Coffee Talk is a visual novel mixed with a barista simulator. type of game. And it's actually very cozy. So far I've just played episode 1, and I'm hoping to complete episode 2 sometime this month. It's similar to Valhalla in that you interact as the barista with your patrons, and you try to mix a certain drink to their specifications or what you think they should have. It's set in a kind of paranormal fantasy environment. So your patrons are made up of all different types of beings. For example, there's a mermaid, an orc, a werewolf, and plenty of others. But what I found so heartwarming about Coffee Talk was just how all the characters interacted with one another and were really trying to help each other out. The story itself is not very long. I want to say it took me 4 to 5 hours to complete, and there's a little bit of replayability to get to the true ending, which may have a little twist in there. But I think it's definitely a very comfortable experience with the setting and the lo-fi beats. I think it's just a perfect visual novel to sit down with for the fall. Next is another visual novel, and that is Raging Loop. So this recently got a re-release or reprint from Video Games Plus. Prior to that reprint, I was having difficulty trying to track down a copy, and what actually happened was I ordered this before that reprint was announced. But thankfully, I got this for a pretty good deal. It was thankfully around the same price as just buying the re-release off Video Games Plus. But this is one I've been really trying to track down for the Switch, because I just hear nothing but good things about the story. I haven't investigated too much about what the plot's about, just to avoid spoilers, but it's supposed to be kind of a thrilling psychological horror sort of game. There's sort of this survival scenario where all these villagers can't escape, but they're being hunted down one by one by these ancient gods. So this probably would have been a perfect visual novel to read over the Halloween sort of spooky time. So I'm sort of tempted to save this for next year, but we'll see when I'll eventually get to this one. Lastly, for my Switch pickups, I have Cult of the Lamb here, the Special Reserve Games edition. And it's been a long time coming, waiting for this to release. The retail release happened way long ago, and there's a lot of disappointments about this, which I'll get into. But one of the things I do enjoy about Special Reserve Games is the packaging. And there's definitely a lot of great details, especially on the outer box here, as well as what they chose for the inside and exterior cover art for the Switch case. Now, the reason why I went with this edition is because it was advertised it would include all of the DLC on the cartridge, which apparently is not the case, unfortunately, despite having waited so long for this to come out. The other false advertisement was this is also supposed to be signed by all the devs, which they included a little card with some printed signatures, but that's definitely not what they advertised. Especially if you look at Gato Roboto, that was actually were hand signed by the devs on the inside cover art. So it's a little disappointing that this wasn't what this is supposed to be. But I guess the good news from all of this is that Special Reserve Games is apparently going to be no more. They're having their last liquidation sale, I think, this weekend. Now, this really does not surprise me given all the issues that Special Reserve Games have gone through, especially these past couple of years. And they often handled Devolver Digital games, which is also what Cult of the Lamb was. And Devolver Digital, who have so many indie games that are big hits, really doesn't need a company like Special Reserve Games just to produce their physical copies, which we've seen with all the retail versions of their very successful releases. I think this all started with Death's Door last year, and we saw that also with Cult of the Lamb getting retail releases. So I think it does make sense that Special Reserve Games pivoted and is no longer handling physical game making. I think they're mostly just helping with like art books and things for Devolver and things like that. But despite me being really excited to play Cult of the Lamb, this disappointing physical has made me not crack it open and start yet. Even though I hear this is really fun. Basically, if you're unfamiliar with this, you play as the lamb who runs his own cult. It becomes kind of a simulator game where you have to recruit new followers, and you could sacrifice them and make them do all these things in your cult. What really drew me to this title is definitely, I think, the art style, because you have very overly cutesy kind of elements mixed with the horror and demonic sort of elements, and together for some reason it's just kind of cute evil, which I guess is also why this was very popular with people when this came out last year. But yeah, when it comes to the cartridge, this is basically the same as the retail version, so there's really no reason to wait for this copy, even though the packaging is nice. But there's also a really nice retail edition, and that comes with an art book and some other cool things, and I think a soundtrack. So honestly, that's a bit better than what they did for this more expensive reserve version. But now moving on to all my PlayStation pickups. So I have one PS Vita game here and quite a few PS4 games. So I'm gonna start with the Vita. And so I finally picked up Steins Gate Zero. So this game has been quite difficult to track down for a reasonable price on the Vita. You can easily get this for around $20 on the PS4, but I always enjoy visual novels on handheld, so I really wanted to get the Vita version. I also own the first Steins Gate game on the Vita, so I wanted them both on the same platform and hopefully maybe play them back to back when I get around to them. But when it comes to the whole science adventure series, you want to start with the first Steins Gate, and then this Steins Gate Zero is the one to go to next, which I believe offers an alternative path to the events that happened in the first game. So now that I finally have this, I feel like I should start my science adventure journey sometime soon. I've watched the anime for Steins Gate, so I want to actually play that game and then move on to this one and get on to the other science adventure spin-offs or other part of the series. I will say that I'm surprised that both the original Steins Gate and Steins Gate Zero haven't made it onto the Switch yet, given all the other PS Vita visual novel ports we've seen so far. There is Steins Gate Elite, but I hear that one you kind of could skip because it does insert, I think, a lot of the anime cutscenes, and it's not quite as good as the originals. So once I get through the two PS Vita games, I'll move on to the Switch releases I have. I'll skip over Steins Gate Elite and move right into the Chaos side of the Science Adventure games. Now for the PS4 games, I bought all these off of Video Games Plus. Most were on sale, and one was a reprint. So I'm gonna start with Odin Sphere, the remake. I guess I own this on the PS Vita, but I couldn't pass up the PS4 copy after they reprinted it and then put it on sale for, I think, $30. I've already started playing the Vita version of this, and I really loved it, so I decided to double dip and also get the PS4 version. Vanillaware always nails their art style, and Odin Sphere is no exception. Like Grim Grimoire, this was originally a PS2 title that they remade for the PS4 and Vita. And I can only speak on the Vita version, but the action combat I think is very seamless. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm really enjoying learning about all the characters and seeing the story build up. I can definitely see why this is a very popular title. And I'm hoping to finish it by the end of this year. I have a few games I've been dabbling with here and there that I haven't quite complete yet, but this one I definitely want to finish by the end of December because I'm really enjoying it. Both of these were bought in a bundle for a discounted price. I forget exactly how much it broke down for each one. It was like $10 to $15 each. But I have Shadow of the Colossus for the PS4, as well as The Last Guardian. When I was younger, I actually never played the PS2 version of Shadow of the Colossus, though I did watch my brother play it a bit. And at the time, I never really understood the appeal of kind of scavenging and traversing this empty world, only to hunt down these 12 colossi in these kind of epic battles. I guess a little confession of mine is that boss fights are not my favorite aspects of games. I like a good boss fight, but they're not really what I find most memorable about them. And so the idea of playing a game that's all about boss fights and battles was never really appealing to me. However, I do recognize that Shadow of the Colossus is a legendary game that definitely was groundbreaking at the time and probably influenced a ton of different games. And I do want to try it to see how I would respond to it now that I have more games under my belt and I'm not too intimidated by the idea of just doing boss battles. And when it comes to The Last Guardian, I know this is much different from the original game, but I'm curious to see kind of how this evolved. I know at the time the wait for this game was very long and most people were disappointed because of how different it was from Shadow of the Colossus. And really, I feel like whenever there's a game that's been delayed for so long and with so much hype around it, the hype never really lives up to the finished product. And I think Last Guardian probably suffered from that as well. But I really do like the idea of having a companion with you in this huge world, whereas Shadow of the Colossus seems very empty most of the time when I was watching it way back when. On this one, you at least have a companion to interact with. And then lastly, for the reprint I got from Video Games Plus is Knights of Azure. Now this is an action RPG game that was made by Gust, who also made the Blue Reflection games as well as the Atelier games. So I've always been intrigued by this game, despite what people say about the fan service and whatnot. And I hear when it comes to the story, the first game is pretty good. Some of it's a little bit lost, I want to say, in the second game, which I plan on getting eventually. It's probably going to be in my next Video Games Plus order whenever they have another sale or they have another reprint I have to get right away. I really wanted to secure a copy of this before it became difficult to get a hold of again. And I do enjoy games with a dark gothic atmosphere to them, so I feel like I'll enjoy this game. And to be honest, the fan service usually doesn't bother me in JRPGs, so I don't really think this one will bother me a whole lot either. So we'll see how it goes. So that does it for all the video games I picked up this past month. Now I'm going to move on to some figures and some merchandise I also picked up. Starting with this watch I've been wearing. So I did end up buying the Trails in the Sky Estelle watch that SuperGroupies made. They are a Japanese fashion brand that does a lot of collaborations with various video game and anime franchises to make functional items. So they do a lot of watches, handbags, some jackets and streetwear, those type of things. So I ended up importing this from the Japanese site because it had a better conversion rate compared to what they were offering on the American US site. And not only did I get a better price off the watch in doing that, it also arrived much quicker than those who used the US site. I think mine arrived 2 to 3 months before others who ordered off the US site got theirs. And this was me also just letting my watch sit in my proxy warehouse for I think a month while I was gathering other items to ship it out. The video I made earlier this year where I share how I use proxy services to import things from Japan, I actually illustrated the process of how to go about ordering from different Japanese websites using this Estelle watch. So I'll have that linked in the description if importing is something you're interested in and want to learn a little bit more about. So I do recommend, if you do want to buy something from SuperGroupies, try to find a Japanese proxy service to purchase from the Japanese site rather than going with the US site whenever possible. So overall, I really love this watch and I've been wearing it quite a bit, even though I don't really go out and about that much. But I think the brown tones they used are just very versatile with whatever you're wearing. And I love all the little details, like the little bracer emblem and Estelle's weapon. The watch really turned out beautiful. This was a rather expensive watch, but I think the quality made it well worth it. And I do have another watch coming, the pocket watch that I think I talked about in my last pickups video, coming sometime next year. So I'm hoping the quality will be as good, if not better, than how this watch turned out. So I do have a few other Trails related things, starting with this Valimar, the Ashen Knight model kit. And long story about this. I originally pre-ordered this through an American retailer. I think it was during some promo they had with free shipping, and it was a little bit cheaper to do that than ordering off of AmiAmi or some of the other Japanese sites at the time. But they ended up canceling my order, so I do not recommend doing pre-orders through that website for anyone who is interested in figure collecting. But I ended up finding a new model kit for a little bit less than retail off of Mercari Japan, and I used a proxy service to import that. So thankfully I was able to secure this guy, and I think when the pre-orders went up for the other model kit that I also have pre-ordered, they were reissuing this as well. So I think this is still fairly easy to find. I need to actually assemble him and paint him. I was thinking of leaving this as a December project because I'll be taking a lot of PTO for my job. And I think this will be a nice project as my first ever model kit. So I'm very excited about this. And then the other Trails item I got is on the shelf here. And that is Fie's figure. So she is the latest figure from the Trails Kotobukiya line, and I think she turned out great. I don't really see any flaws in the paint or the sculpt. It is a little strange seeing her with the support rod here, since none of the other figures had this, but definitely with her pose, it makes sense why they would put this here, because I can see her leaning over time, despite having a pretty good and secure peg in this foot. She was very easy to assemble. You just had to stick her on the base, so you don't have to mess with her weapons or anything. One thing I did notice was that her base, all the other Trails figures have these acrylic bases, and Fie's definitely stands out next to all of them. with the brighter colors, because everyone else has these darker blues or purples or grays. They all kind of work together, but Fie's definitely kind of looks like the odd one out. So one of the things I found particularly funny about the promotions of Fie's figure was how Koribukiya perfectly placed all the 180 and the Photoshop previews to not show her behind. And that's because you can't see her underwear, I want to say, or it could be like, what are those, like safety bikinis that women wear in sports? It could be one of those, but you definitely do see it on her rear end here. So it is kind of interesting they went with this route with Fie's character. Trails does have some fan service, though it's interesting how we haven't seen as much of it in these figures yet, but we do see it pretty prominently in Fie's figure here. This element does not bother me in the slightest, mostly because I'll be displaying Fie face forward right next to Crow here, so no one will even know. So I guess if I do have a figure that goes behind her, maybe they will be able to see it. But so the next figure I have is a Pop-Up Parade, and that is Zagreus from Hades. He is my second Pop-Up Parade figure from the Good Smile more affordable line. My other one is Aiba from AI The Somniphiles. I've spoken about this a few times on the channel already, but Hades is one of my favorite games of all time, so I'm really happy to have Zagreus in figure form now. He looks perfect next to my Cerberus plush that I got off of Fangamer in my Super Giant Games section on my shelf. So I've been a little hesitant to dive into the Pop-Up Parade figure line, mostly because they have anime figures. They don't have too many gaming related figures, but I definitely had to grab Zagreus here. His sword is removable and you could reposition it. I think they did a really good job with the sculpt and the shading. It's interesting how they changed up the base actually. They used to have this more hexagonal base that was kind of a prominent feature of all the Pop-Up Parade lines, but I've been seeing more of these round bases become, I guess, the new base for a lot of these figures. But after he released, I was having a difficult time finding him for a reasonable price because I waited too long. But I was able to find him for a pretty good deal off of the IGN store. It's a store I always forget about, but when I was Googling the Zagreus Pop-Up Parade figure, they popped up and it came within a week, so I'm pretty happy. That was my first time buying from that store, and I thought the turnaround was perfectly reasonable, and I'm pretty happy overall with the experience. So I've definitely looked more into them for at least backup figures if I kind of miss a pre-order window or I don't find it on the aftermarket for a reasonable price shortly after some figures come out. So the last figure I have to share is one I got for a really great price, and it was a little bit of an impulse buy because I wasn't planning to buy him so soon, but for the price, it was something I couldn't pass up. And that is Marth from Fire Emblem. For some reason, Amazon Japan was just offering a ton of really cheap things off of the US Amazon website with free shipping. And so Marth was listed for about $100 free shipping. So that was definitely a price I was willing to pay because I think when he came out, it was really easy just to spend, I think, around $200 for him, including shipping from Japan to the US. And of course, the currency exchange is much better than when he was released last year, so that may have been a factor in this as well. But overall, I'm really happy to have him. There's a lot of great elements to the sculpt overall. When I was inspecting him, I didn't notice really any flaws with the paint job at all, which was definitely a bonus. And the only, I guess, nitpick thing I have is I can't get him fully inside the foot peg here. So it's slightly sticking out, and I've tried a lot of things to try to fit him in there securely, but I think unfortunately this is as far as it's gonna go, which is a little bit of a bummer, but you really can't tell when he's sitting on my shelf. Only I know, and I just hope it's not gonna hurt the integrity of the figure over time. But we'll see. But I think they did a really great job with Marth's flowy cape, and thankfully this does not need a support rod like Ike's cape needed, because it's not quite so massive. And I think his shield here looks really great, even though it is kind of covered up a bit. I kind of wish they angled it so that was a little bit more prominent. But one cool thing about this figure is very similar to Lynn's in that you can turn or twist his wrist here, and that changes the position of the sword. That way, wherever he is situated on your shelf, he could be in a nice fighting pose or make it so that the blade's not obscuring his face. But he's a very solid figure, and I think they did a good job with his face. It's very anime pretty boy-esque, which is fitting based off of what he's looked like in more recent renditions. I do find the stone base a little bit strange in that it's a square shape and you do have little tufts of grass sticking out. But I think they did a really great job with his garments. His boots are not as detailed as I think some of the other Fire Emblem line, but the gold and just the contrast to the blue and red, I think just makes this figure really stunning. So I'm really glad I waited and picked him up during the sale because this is probably the best price I've seen him. And I had some Amazon credit, and so that just made the price even sweeter. All right, so then that's everything for this pickups haul. I hope you guys enjoyed all of my game pickups as well as some of the figures I shared today. These past couple weeks, I've also been picking up some new filming equipment. So I have a new camera and some mics coming in that I'm really excited to kind of upgrade this filming setup. So I'm hoping by the end of this month, I'll have a more professional looking filming setup. So I just wanted to thank everyone who's been watching my videos and helped make that possible. It'll probably take me a while to tinker with it and kind of understand how to get the gear working the right way, but I'm really hoping that it does help level up these videos and make them a bit more enjoyable for you all. As far as this month goes, I don't have too many pickups on the way, but because it is November, we're getting towards the holiday seasons, I expect there's going to be quite a few sales happening, so we'll see if I go crazy again this month. But if not, that's okay too, because I really don't mind just waiting for the sales to happen. There's a lot of new games that have been coming out, and I've had a lot of people ask me whether or not I'm picking them up. And the answer to all that is I'm most likely going to be waiting for them to go on sale, like I normally do. I only have a handful of franchises that I pick up on day one, and that's usually so that I can secure the collector's editions. But when it comes to standard releases and things, I really don't mind waiting on sale unless they're in limited supply and I think they might go out of print or something. But with all that said, I would love to hear what pickups you may have gotten this past month or so. And if you managed to pick up some of the new releases that everyone's been very hyped about. I have a very long list of new releases I want to get to eventually. But again, I think it makes more sense for me to wait because of just how crazy my backlog is. But definitely let me know if any of the new games deserve the hype or not, if you had a chance to play them. And until my next video, bye guys.